I was born a princess, but treated as property from the cradle. Where I was born, blue blood doesn't save you, it only disguises the chains. For years I lived among gold, palaces, and kneeling servants. But being born a woman was enough for my existence to become a mistake to be corrected. I cannot say my name, because in my land a woman who dares to think dies. The first time I was beaten, it wasn't for disobedience. It was for trying to pray like my father. I was 4 years old. I was just a child imitating the gesture I saw everyone do. I knelt before my brother Ali and repeated his words without understanding. My mother, normally serene, slapped me with a fury that froze me inside. She didn't explain, she just hit me, and I learned, even prayer has an owner, and that owner is not a girl. I grew up inside a house too big, where the walls echoed orders more than female voices. We were 10 girls, all with curious eyes, swallowed questions, and measured smiles. And there was only one boy, one, Ali, the one everyone treated as divine. He didn't need to do anything to be loved, just exist. We, on the other hand, needed to disappear so as not to bother. When he passed by, adults bowed. When we passed by, they looked at the ground. My mother spent years pregnant, waiting for the miracle that would be my brother. Each girl that was born was received with lament. Each menstruation treated as a curse. When Ali finally arrived, our house transformed into a temple dedicated to him. He got his own room, gold-plated cutlery, toys I couldn't even count. Me? I gained the fear of being noticed. In silence, I learned to smile modestly, to walk without making noise, to accept crumbs as if they were prizes. In our house, obedience was the only form of survival. One step out of line, and punishment came quickly. Age didn't matter. A broken toy? Sister's fault. A glass out of place? Sister's fault. And there was always a beating to confirm it. Ali was adored, even when he was cruel. He liked to pull cats' tails, hid the maid's shoes, push his sisters in the hallway. We laughed, not because it was funny, but because we knew not laughing was risky. He was untouchable. We were the shadows. There was something worse than physical pain. Mandatory silence. You couldn't cry loudly. You couldn't tell anyone. Female tears were treated as weakness, and weakness was a luxury that Saudi women couldn't have. That's how I learned to use a smile as an armor, and silence as a language. Still a child, I became an expert at suffocating my own soul to fit the role they gave me. Invisible, obedient, and decorative. After that episode, nothing returned to normal. Not that it had ever been normal, but from then on, it became evident I wasn't just an inferior daughter. I was a threat. And Ali, more than ever, was elevated to the position of a demigod. There were no punishments for him, no limits. Everything he desired, he received. Everything he did was tolerated. And everyone, even the adults, treated him with a reverence that bordered on worship. At 10, Ali got a Rolex watch. At 14, 4 Porsche cars. When I asked for a gold bracelet, I was ignored as if I had offended someone. One day, I found that watch thrown in a corner. It was just an object forgotten by someone who has everything. I picked up a stone and destroyed it. It was my silent revenge, a mute response to the system that silenced me every day. My brother grew up with the world at his feet and no empathy in his heart. He gave orders to servants like a sultan. He humiliated a disabled boy just to laugh. Once he tore a kitten from its mother, saying he wanted to see if she would cry. He taught us, with his unpunishment acts, the real value of a woman inside our house. None. The height of absurdity came when we found an abandoned dog. Sarah and I cared for it with education. It was the only being that returned affection without charge. But it was enough for Ali to say, I want it. And the animal was torn from our hands. Days later, we discovered he had thrown the dog out the car window while moving. It was at that moment I understood the true danger of a man raised as a god. He forgets that others feel, that others suffer, that others even exist. Ali was the perfect product of a system where men are taught to command and women to disappear. While he received applause for every gesture, we learned to be silent even in the face of the greatest injustice. And still, something inside me screamed, even if no one heard. It was in this environment that my anger stopped being childish. It began to transform into consciousness. I didn't just hate my brother, I hated the altar on which he was placed. Because every altar has a price. And in this one, the sacrifice was always feminine. After Sarah's suicide attempt, something broke inside all of us. But mainly inside the woman who, until then, had been the most obedient in the house, our mother. The same one who always lowered her head, the same one who was given in marriage at 12, the same one who spent her life pregnant, asking God for a male child to please a husband who never truly loved her. It was she, precisely she, who decided to confront the system. I remember the moment I saw my mother raise her eyes and defy the impossible. She walked firmly on the groom's father's house, pressed her finger to the wrinkled face of Sarah's mother-in-law, and screamed as if she were letting decades of pain out. She didn't ask, she demanded. She said her daughter would not return to that hell, even if she had to face the religious authorities and the king himself. My father was in shock. The submissive woman who had molded with screams and punishment no longer existed. In her place, there was a wounded lioness. He threatened her with divorce, said he would expel her, that she would never see her children again. And she, with eyes ablaze, responded with a calm that chilled even the walls. You can divorce me, but my daughter is not going back to that man. That was the first time I saw a man like my father retreat, and the last time I saw him fear a woman. Under pressure, Sarah's husband was forced to formalize the divorce. 3 words were enough. I divorce you. They were said before 2 men, as tradition demands. And with that, the bond was broken. Sarah, by man's law, was free. But the truth is that no one emerged unscathed after being sold as a prize. She returned home, but left parts of herself in that place. Her eyes no longer shone, her hands trembled, and her voice, once full of dreams, now sounded like a distant echo. My mother's victory was real, but it came too late. Because freedom that is only conquered after destruction doesn't taste like triumph. It tastes like mourning. And I, observing everything in silence, understood that courage isn't born from power. It's born from accumulated pain. And that one day, this pain would also explode in me. Seeing my mother defy my father was like watching a wall tremble. Something previously unthinkable was now real. And this awakened a new courage in me. Until that moment, I had learned to swallow my pain in silence. But Sarah's suicide attempt and our mother's unexpected roar lit a fire I could no longer hide. I was still considered the youngest and the least dangerous, the most well-behaved. But inside me that scream was growing, and Ali remained the same, cruel, untouchable, mocking others' pains as if it were a birthright. After everything that happened with Sarah, he had the audacity to laugh at the table. He said my sister only tried to kill herself because she was weak. That fragile woman didn't deserve respect. That was the spark. For months I observed, I spied, I studied his habits. I knew where he hid his forbidden magazines, the imported alcohol he swore not to touch, the obscene photos, even images with animals, things that, if discovered, would destroy his image before the religious police. I waited for the right moment, and then I hid everything inside a mosque, a sacred place, a location no one would ever dare profane. But he had already done that to our house, to our bodies, to our minds. I made an anonymous report. The eye of the Mutawa, the virtual worlds, was like the sound of a final judgment. Scream scandal, my father beside himself, the police demanding explanation, and, for the first time, Ali had no way to escape. He wasn't arrested. They paid for his freedom. But he was exposed, humiliated. He had to look into his own father's eyes and deny what everyone knew was true. And me? I was there, motionless, until our gaze met. In that instant, he knew it had been me. He didn't say a word, but his gaze didn't carry hatred. It carried something I had never seen in him. Fear. For the first time, he understood that I was no longer a shadow. In the midst of the chaos, my father embraced me. The same man who never called my name with tenderness. And he said, with a trembling voice, "Don't cry." But I cried, because that embrace wasn't love. It was relief. It was consolation for a mistake he still didn't understand. And that destroyed me more than any punishment. That night I knew I was no longer just a daughter. I was now a risk. After that night, I was never the same. The fear that kept me trapped gave me way to a force I couldn't name. My father watched me with caution. Ali avoided me. And my mother looked at me like someone who sees a seed of war growing inside her daughter. And that's exactly what it was. The war had begun. From within. But fighting alone was dangerous. And it was also useless. I knew that if I wanted to make any difference, I needed to find others who carried the same rage disguised as silence. That's how, almost without planning, what we call Los Labios Vivos was born. A symbolic name, a code among prisoners, because our lips were never dead, just suffocated. We were three in the beginning, me, Nadia, and Wafa. Nadia came from an influential family. Daughter of a wealthy contractor, she grew up surrounded by luxury, but always with fear. Her older sisters had been sold in arranged marriages to men old enough to be their grandfathers. She knew her return was near. At 17, she counted the months like someone counting the last days of freedom before execution. Wafa was different. She came from a suffocating home. Her father was a mutawa, a religious police officer. Extremely rigid, he forbade her mother from even looking out the window. Since she was 7, Wafa wore an abaya. Since she was 9, she heard the same question from her father. Has she menstruated yet? He wanted to know when he could lock her away forever, when he could erase her presence from public life. The three of us carried different fears, but a common pain. Being a woman in a land where the veil doesn't just cover the face, it covers the soul. We met in secret in the back of libraries in forgotten gardens behind walls with promises of silence. We read forbidden books, we shared accounts, we planned ways to alert another women. We wanted to fight forced marriages, talk about pleasure, study biology, knew our bodies and our voices. We weren't rebels, we were conscious survivors, women who refused to accept that only option was to wait for a husband 40 years older in a house cell with golden curtains. Los Labios Vivos wasn't just a club, it was an act of resistance, and for us, every word spoken aloud was a small miracle. But miracles in places like ours don't last very long. Our secret meetings with Los Labios Vivos gave me breath to resist. But what came next was a blow that took my breath away unexpectedly. A dry announcement, as if saying he was going to buy bread, my father was going to marry again. And the chosen one was Randa. She was 15 years old, 1 year older than me. Daughter of a branch of the royal family, Randa was shy, delicate, and extremely young. When she arrived at our house, she wore the veil with such rigidity that we could barely see her face. There was no space for her, neither physical or emotional, and yet she was placed there, as the new wife of an old man enough to be her grandfather. At first, all I felt was rage, not just because he had forgotten my mother, the woman who gave him 16 children, but because he replaced her memory with such speed and coldness. Randa, to me, was a symbol of betrayal. But it was enough to see her on the wedding day for everything to change. She was pale, with trembling lips and empty eyes. The makeup covered her youth but didn't hide the fear. When my father took her from the party room to the bridal chamber, something inside me broke. Not from hatred, from compassion. It was there that I understood something essential. We were all prisoners of the same system. It didn't matter if we were born in palaces or in slums. It didn't matter if we were daughters, wives, or servants. When we were born women in this land, we were already condemned to obey. Randa wasn't my enemy. She was just my sister in pain. While my father left on his honeymoon with her to Paris and Monte Carlo, I made a silent decision. When she returned, I would awaken her, not just to the abuses hidden behind veils and jewels, but to the great admission that was beginning to boil in me, awakening the women of my people to what they were suffering in silence. It wasn't just about showing new horizons to Randa. It was about hurting my father in the only place he didn't expect, inside his own house, through the consciousness of the wife he thought he possessed. I would make his little stepmother an ally, because what he'd called marriage, I would transform into resistance. Randa returned from her honeymoon like an elegant shadow, dressed in silk, but with her soul sewn by fear. And while she tried to fit into a routine of time's obedience, something new began to disturb me. The gaze of women who served us. Until then, I barely noticed them. They were always there, in silence, lowering their heads, cleaning, cooking, disappearing through the corners of the house like ghosts in uniform. But it was Marcy, our Filipino maid, who had made me see what I had never seen. The empire I lived in was sustained on the broken shoulders of foreign women. Marcy was sweet. She always smiled. She always said, "Yes, ma'am." But one day I found her crying, discreetly, as we all learned to do. I insisted, I asked, and she spoke. She told me about Madeline, her childhood friend, sent to Saudi Arabia by a work agency to be a domestic worker. They promised her salary, housing, respect. What she found was something else. Upon arrival, she was informed that she would serve the desires of the teenage sons of the house, and then the father too. Raped on her first night, beaten for trying to escape, ignored by the embassy and watched by complicit neighbors. Madeline survived 2 years in that hell, and when she returned to the Philippines, she carried not only the trauma, but also the hatred of her own friend for feeling that Marcy didn't do enough to save her. It was the first time I realized that it wasn't just us Saudi women who lived under domination. Foreign women lived even worse, without rights, without names, without protection. They were disposable. Mercy also told me about a young woman from Pakistan who suffered brain injury after being pushed down the stairs, just because she stumbled near my father's second wife. The response? Deportation in 2 months of denied salary. Nobody filed a complaint. Nobody cared, because here, these women aren't seen as people. They're seen as utensils, and when they break, they're replaced. That night, I locked myself in my room and cried. For the first time, I cried not for myself, not for Sarah, not for Randa, but for the invisible woman who sustained our luxurious lives with blood and pain. It was there that I understood a cruel truth. My privilege smelled of French perfume, but also tastes of the bitter flavor of disguised slavery. After that conversation with Marcy, my world, already cracked, began to crumble completely. Until then, I believed that we, the daughters of the house, the women with veils and royal blood, were the ones who suffered in silence. But what I discovered was even more perverse. We were also accomplices. Accomplices of a machine that crushed other women long before reaching us. One night I met Madeline, the real one. She was thinner, with sunken eyes, her voice slow like someone who had unlearned to speak. Through tears, she told me how the men of the house, including Ali, had violated her repeatedly, and how, even pleading for help, she only received silence. I questioned my family about what they had done. No answer, just that arrogant silence that so often dresses evil with the cloak of normalcy. In that instant, something inside me died. The illusion that my pain was unique, I discovered it was part of a network of abuse as old as the walls of our house. I began paying attention to the men's conversation during dinners. Between laughter, they talked about their annual trips to Thailand and the Philippines. I thought they were business trips, but they weren't. They bought bodies, they rented youth, they traded innocence for pleasure. Ali mocked me when I confronted him. He said our own father had given him the contact, that all of that was part of men's rights, as if it were sacred, as if evil were authorized but cultured, by faith, by power. I didn't know if I was crying for Madeline, for Marcy, for Randa, for myself, or for all of us at the same time. What I knew was that we all lived in the same type of cell, some golden, others concrete, some with silk veils, others with burdens of silence, but all locked, all invisible, all prisoners. Awakening in that place was dangerous, but continue to sleep was deadly. In January 1972, everything consolidated. Yuda, our old son and slave, held my hands and froze. She murmured prayers. Then, with a low voice, she prophesied, "Your father will announce your marriage soon, and the man who comes will bring sadness and love at the same time. He will not be your prison. He will be your oar." That same night, my father confirmed it. I was promised to Karim, a distant cousin, 12 years older. He would be my future, my new cell. But he didn't expect that I would enter the prison with my head down. I used every weapon I had. Lies, threats, acting. I said my face was deformed, that my attitudes were dangerous. When they came to examine me, I raised my feet in offense, the most humiliating gesture a woman can make in our culture. And for the first time, I saw my father laugh. Laugh at my audacity. Laugh at my madness. But I wasn't playing. I was determined. I didn't just want to escape a marriage. I wanted to break a cycle. I wanted my daughters someday to be born in a country where they wouldn't be sold for dowry or silenced by tradition, where the veil wouldn't be a gag, where the love wouldn't be a punishment. My war wasn't against a man. It was against an entire system. And that war was just beginning. Because when my father discovered what I had created with Nadia and Wafa, everything changed. And the punishment didn't fall only on me.